Welcome to Now for Someone Completely Interesting. I'm your host, Ben Poulin. I have a long list of potential guests when it comes to this show, and I'm always adding to it, and you never know when the next name is going to pop up. Like when a mutual friend gave Danica my contact info so she could ask me some questions about starting a podcast. Well, I'm happy to answer what I can. I had some questions of my own, like, why? What kind of podcast? And would you like to come on mine? All coming up with completely interesting answers is which is why I'm happy to welcome teacher, musician, mother, wife, and future podcast host, someone completely interesting, Danica St Arnault. Welcome to the podcast, Danica, and thank you for accepting the invite. Long list of questions, actually, that I do have for you because there's a lot of interesting things that we did talk about that kind of lead up to why you want to start a podcast. So first and foremost, let's get to know you a little bit better. You said you're born and raised in Mallaig, Alberta.
Yeah.
And continue to call Mallaig home.
I do, yeah. I was born and raised on a farm just outside of Mallaig. My parents still live on the homestead in which I was raised. And the cool thing is my dad was actually raised on that same homestead.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a special place for us. I'm the second daughter of 4 girls. And I married my junior high sweetheart from Mallaig.
Wow.
Yeah. I did leave and I went to Edmonton for my degree.
Right.
So I got a degree in secondary education from the University of Alberta. And then came back home because he was taking over or wanted to take over his dad's concrete company. Mm-hmm. And I had my teaching degree. So it was it could work. We could make it work from this location.
And you did teach at Mallaig School?
I did. So I started my career in 2012 at Regional in St. Paul, and I taught 2 years there. And then I went and taught in Bonnyville for 2.5 years approximately because I had 2 mat leaves in there. And then I, with little ones, it was just really tricky to coordinate all the travel. And because from Bonnyville to Mallaig, it's about 54 kilometers one way.
Right.
And then babysitter and all that stuff. So I just said, you know what, I'm going to try to work closer to home. That'll probably make it easier on all of us. And so then I taught in Mallaig for, it was maybe 5 years.
Okay.
Or so. Yeah.
Just let's go back just a little bit here. So this is an interesting story to me because I've been talking to a few people and I've had them on my podcast as well that deal with, things like economic development and how to preserve the small towns in our rural areas. And one of the challenges is not so much keeping the young people here, but how to get the young people to come back and what's for them. So can you explain a little bit about why you guys wanted to come back? Was it just because of your husband wanting to take over that, or what was the draw for you? Or did you always feel more connected to the area?
Okay. So when I was in university in my 3rd year, I had applied for the Northern Alberta Teaching Bursary.
Okay.
Which was like it was awesome. They gave me $8,000 in my 3rd year and $8,000 in my 4th year.
Wow.
But it was a contract as well. So they're like, here's some money, but you're going to come back to Northern Alberta, and they give you like a map of like a range, right? Where you could go back to teach. You have to teach 3 years. And as long as you fulfill that contract, that money is yours to use for tuition, whatever you need it for your education. So I had applied for that. So that was like one of the reasons that I had come back.
Okay.
I have tons of family in this area. Like my mom was born and raised just by Therian, and my dad, like I said, on his homestead. So my parents, like we just have a lot of family here, and my husband, same thing. His grandparents were located right in Mallaig, and his mom was from the Spedden area.
Right. Because it's just as easy to say, well, if you live in, say, Fort Saskatchewan or Edmonton, you're close enough and you can still have your family connections and everything like that.
True.
But it's nice to hear these stories of people coming back and just continuing on and setting up, we're talking generations of roots there with both you and your husband's family. So, and so you're still living right near Mallaig?
So we actually so my husband and I bought his parents' homestead. So now we are living in the same yard and house that my husband was raised in.
Oh, wow.
And his mom and dad built a new house next door. So they're our neighbors. And because so he owns a concrete company. So all of the shops and the equipment and the setup was already set up in our yard.
Right.
And because there was kind of the plan of a transition in the future, so it just made sense to have us live there.
What about with, like you said, so your dad is now second generation on that, and you're one of 4 girls. Is there anybody lining up to maybe continue on with to keep the family on that property, or?
They never pressured us to like to stay. Like, and I think if one of us wanted it, they would be more than happy to say like yes. But there was never any pressure, which was really nice.
I just think it would be cool to continue on with the generation.
It would be cool. But at this point in time, I don't think any of us are looking to move.
Right. It's just an interesting angle, like I said, with that. So you were a teacher for how many years now?
Okay, well, I started teaching in 2012, and then I had 3 mat leaves within that time frame. So I think I taught for a total of about 7.5 years.
Okay,
like on paper.
That seems like a busy schedule with teaching and raising a family.
It was like teaching child, COVID.
Right. Right.
So it was just a lot in a decade. It was a lot.
So we talked briefly, and you mentioned about that. So you've kind of stepped away from the teaching career. Was it because of the challenge of COVID, or was it just you were looking to spend more time with the family, or what sort of?
So it was a compilation of a lot of different factors. So COVID hit, and for teachers, that was a really, well, I'm not going to just say teachers. I know it was difficult and tricky for everybody. Right. I don't want to just put that on teachers. But we went from teaching in person to teaching over a computer screen. Yeah. And then kids came back, and you're trying to hold like the standard, the government saying, here, you need to like test them at this level, which was wild because it's like they haven't been in the classroom for 2 years. How are we going to like hold a standard that's kind of not realistic to hold at this time? Right. So that made it really stressful for students, for teachers, for parents. So that was just a lot of pressure, and people had been just so tired and dysregulated at the time that I think a lot of people they just lost the ability to be kind. And I get it. Like, I'm empathetic to, like, if you didn't know where your next paycheck was coming from, or if you know, if you had just, mental health was at an all-time low. So it was just a really tricky time for myself, actually, like dealing with that. And then that coupled with my husband had taken over his dad's company. Like he took over the estimating and the organization of the men, and he just took on a lot more responsibility. And I was teaching full time, and I was learning how to bookkeep for him. So I was teaching, I was parenting, I was bookkeeping, and it was just overwhelming. So we just had a conversation, and we decided, you know what, it probably makes more sense for our family if at least one of us was just like home a little bit more. And just because of the nature of our situation, I was like, I'll step back, and I could still sub, which is what I'm still doing. I'm substitute teaching, and that just gives our family and myself the flexibility to, fulfill all the many hats that I wear. Right. As a mother and a bookkeeper and a teacher, and yeah.
What kind of teaching were you doing? Like what grades or what age or what subjects?
So when I started my career, I was teaching high school at Regional. I taught math and science predominantly. I've also taught phys ed, French, music. And then I went to Bonnyville in a middle school, and I taught French immersion. So I taught math and science in French. I started with grade 5, 6, 7, those first couple years. I also taught religion. I taught health. And then I moved to Malag. And so then it was junior and senior high. So I was teaching grade 7 to 12 math science. So at this point in my career, I've taught almost every single math and science course from grade 5 to grade 12, including Physics 30, Bio 2030, Science 2030, and math. I've taught math 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-C, 20-1, like you name it. I've taught most of them. So I would call myself a generalist. I never really had time to like dig in and settle into one level.
Is that common for teachers? Because I only remember teachers like specializing in like 1 or 2 subjects.
It's so interesting. Every teacher's story is different. Yeah. So I have a good friend of mine who's just taught math, science, physics, at a high school for the last decade. And that's what he teaches. And he's very good at it. He's had a lot of time to get good at it. I think you got to stay maybe in the same place. Yeah. Same place in the same position. And then you might have that opportunity. Right. I think maybe because I chose to make changes that it was maybe more so that way for me.
Was that something you kind of thought you would do, or when you were going into teaching and when you were getting your education, did you think you were going to kind of settle into one area?
I think I always was naturally drawn to science. Well, my degree is in physical sciences, my major anyways. So I had a really, really good math and science teacher in high school. His name was Brad Langdale, and he was awesome. Like he was just so engaging, and he made it fun, and he was funny, and there was always little challenges, and he let us shave his head at one point because the kid got 100%. Like he was just really fun. And so I think I just fell in love with it, and it was something I was really good at it. So I pursued it in university because it was something I knew I could probably do well in.
Right.
And and teaching was something that called to me because I didn't know. I assumed with my skill set that I could probably do a good job at it. And I wanted a career that would allow for a family life.
What were some of the favorite things that happened over the course of your career as a teacher? Any kind of some of the anecdotes or stories that stand out that make you proud or maybe laugh?
Like I've received so much actually from kids and parents alike throughout my career. There's like one student that stands out. We had a rule with this child that he could only ask 3 questions a class because he would ask you, like if you didn't cap it, he would ask you and interrupt you and be like, Madame, or like, you get 3 questions, make them count. So he learned to be very good at asking questions. I got to teach Bio 30, which is really fun. There's like the reproduction unit in there.
Right.
So honestly, so many fun questions, and I don't shy away from them. Like I really like, it's learning. They have their questions, so we've had lots of good laughs in those kinds of classes. And I remember my grade 7 class in Bonnyville. I was teaching them. What was I teaching them? I think it was religion, and we did like a unit on community service. And I took them to the senior center once a week to go play crib with the seniors. So we'd walk from the school to the senior center, we'd play crib with them, and they'd get free ice cream, and then we'd go back to back to school. That was really fun.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That you did that. Yeah. Because I know really seniors like crib and they like to visit with people.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to dwell on the COVID, but I think it's an important part of what has transpired in our society and stuff like that. So when you were teaching in Maleg at the time that you had to deal with all the, so you did the online portion and then you came back to the classroom, and what were some of the things that you noticed with the kids themselves?
So I'm just going to speak for myself and I guess my experience and what some of my colleagues had.
And I don't want to put you on the spot and make
okay.
you, yeah. So
it's
my curiosity that kind of.
So what was it like? So some kids were okay. Like some kids came back and they were still at grade level. They had managed to like keep up with their studies. They had come to the online classes. They had done the homework. They had parents that were like involved in their education. And then there was some kids who I don't think really looked at the curriculum a whole lot. And for whatever reason, and there's a lot of different circumstances within families. Like I know there were even, in other schools within our division, there were kids who didn't even have access to computers or internet, right, in certain places. So, I mean, we all weathered the same storm, but we were in very different boats.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Because I can say, well, my kid was involved through all this too, but the smaller school he goes to, the Cul de Samet there. So, and we didn't have problems with, and he's quite a bit smarter than me, I'll give him that. But I know for me personally, if I had been going through a situation like this, I'm very much a hands-on learner, not a book learner, not a self-motivated learner. I need someone to tell me what to do and how to do it and show me. And I guess, yeah, I think people like me would have suffered.
For sure.
I probably would have had to repeat or do some upgrading here before I could move on. I guess depending on what grade I was at, but I'm just, from a high school standpoint, it's a big challenge. So
for sure. And it wasn't even for sure. There was like the academic portion. And then I know in the younger grades, I heard teachers talk about how like kids' attention spans were not quite the same either. Like that had shifted a little bit because if you've spent a lot of time on screens, and you get that instant gratification, you kind of want that. And so that reteaching that like delayed gratification was really tricky.
Yeah.
and just teaching them how to interact with each other again was really tricky, just because for kids who really need that practice with those visual, like social cues, those in-person social cues, and you don't have that for 2 years, and you come back to the classroom and, you know, you're not reading somebody's body language correctly because you're just kind of, you know, you were in that part of your development, right, in school. So that it made teachers have to teach way more than they ever did. There was like this hidden curriculum. We're trying to like not only bridge these academic gaps, but also bridge these like social emotional gaps. And it's overwhelming. And I really feel for teachers because I know even this year they've taken away prep time within our division for teachers, and that's making it really, really challenging, especially post-COVID. So I'm happy to come in as a substitute and help where I can and just serve when and where I can. And it's tricky though, because I have to learn. I'm still learning how to say no. It's tricky because you want to go in and help sometimes, but you're like, I just can't today. I wish I could.
Yeah. You mentioned music as part of your teaching repertoire. So I'm assuming there's a bit of a musical background with you as well.
Yeah. So music is something that I love. I learned how to play. My mom put us in piano lessons when we were little, so elementary school. So I took about 5 years of piano lessons, and then I moved on to the guitar, and I took 2 years of guitar lessons. And then it was just something I kind of just like fiddled around with. I guess I sang a little bit like in church and at weddings growing up. And I always loved it, but never really pursued it. Right. And then just recently, actually last December, I joined a band. So that was fun. So I joined a band in January, and I've been playing and practicing and learning and singing, and that's been a lot of fun.
Which band is that?
A Second Son.
With Justin.
Yes. And Matt and Terry and Jaden. It's been awesome. Yeah.
No, you guys get around here quite a bit then. So
yeah.
Was it? I stand up and MC events occasionally, and I have a hard time with that, even though it doesn't seem like it. But forget singing because I can't sing. Period. Right. But from not really indulging in that to actually getting up and performing, how was that? Was that an easy transition for you, or was it like how I feel sitting in front of introducing the band, I guess?
Well, the story is actually quite funny. So we were at a Christmas party in Maleg last December, and I was having a good time, and I went up, I was dancing with my husband, and I went up to the band and I said, "Can you play 500 Miles?" Yeah. And Justin's like, I didn't even know it was Justin at the time. The guy's like, I know that song, but I don't know all the words. Do you want to sing it? And I was like, yeah. So I just jumped on stage, and they just started playing it, and I just started singing it, and it was just fun. And then after, I'm like, can I join your band? And then I don't think they thought I was serious, but I was very serious. And then I just asked if I could come practice with them, and the rest is kind of history. I practiced for 6 months straight before I actually like performed with them.
So what was your first official performance?
Officially, I performed at Casino Dene with them in June.
In June. Okay.
Yeah.
So just recently.
Yeah.
Then. Wow. But weren't three of you at the, it was at the brewery there for okay. That's where I recognize you from.
Okay. Yes. I sang at the brewery.
I was there briefly. That was a chaotic night. Okay. Really fun, but chaotic.
Yeah, I bet. I bet.
Okay. So I have heard you sing then. All right. But you mentioned too that you are now writing your own material.
Yeah. I've been kind of just dabbling. I've been writing my own stuff, or at least I started. I've written my husband a couple of songs, and I performed one for him on our wedding day.
Oh, wow.
So I'd played and sang on our wedding day to him a song that I wrote. So I had those, and then I kind of had left it for a while, and I've just recently like tried again, and I've got a few down that some I really like. So I'm hoping to record them.
But you're not willing to divulge anything just yet?
I'm a perfectionist.
Okay.
I really am a perfectionist. So,
I'm by no means putting you on the spot, but it's a neat thing to hear like how people process and do that kind of stuff. So it's a talent I can appreciate, but can't imagine doing it myself.
Yeah, I think we all have talents, so it's interesting when you just tap into something that's natural. It tends to just flow.
I'm fascinated by how people. I mean, you could write a poem, which is like lyrics,
Mm-hmm.
but then to decide what kind of music to go with that. I don't know how people do that. Do you have the song in your head or do you have the lyrics in your head first?
Sometimes it's one or the other.
Right.
It's really interesting, actually. So Matt had written a song, like just a musical piano piece, and
Right.
it was really, really beautiful. And he sent it to me, and I said, "Hey, can I work on this? Like, I would just like to see what I can come up with." And he's like, "Yeah, for sure." And it took me about 2 hours, and I like wrote the lyrics to that song.
Wow.
So it's like sometimes you can hear it. I could feel what I wanted it to sound like, what I wanted it to say, and then it just like kind of flowed. Sometimes it flows, and then other times you kind of get like stuck, and then
Yeah.
you sit on it for a couple of days or sometimes a week or a month, and you come back to it and you're like, okay, now I know exactly what it just kind of comes through. I think it's no different than maybe like a painter painting a picture.
Yeah.
You might start it, and then you might sit, or a writer writing a book, or I think it's just that creative artistic process.
That's what I find fascinating too, just how people, because it's different for everyone, I think too, right? So to hear how one individual like yourself can navigate that is, to me, it's fascinating.
Oh, thanks.
I can't do it. So.
And the guys say like for them, they'll play around more with the melodies first, and I actually have like pages of lyrics written.
Right.
So it's like so it's actually kind of nice. We look forward to getting together and like cohesively trying to do that.
That's
even
cool.
Together. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing some original material in the future because I know Second
you.
Son performs a lot in the area. So, like, are you planning to collaborate with them on it, or are you
For sure.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah. I've already asked them if in the future they'd be interested in like playing on some of it, and yeah, they're super willing.
That'd be
We all
cool.
just love music, so it's
Yeah.
it's fun. We just have fun doing it.
It's not fun playing Name That Tune against Justin. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, I bet you he'd beat you.
Well, yeah, I think he did it once. They had a trivia night at the brewery that did Name That Tune, and he was there once, and he just smashed everybody. And I think it was like, but when you cover, because he does a lot of covers, you have to know a lot of music, like a lot.
And he can play it all on the
Yeah,
fly.
yeah,
It's
that's
crazy.
crazy. So
Yeah.
that's a whole other cool talent too.
It
So,
is.
but I know he listens a little bit once in a while to the episodes, so don't mind giving him some some name mentions there. So, but I think a lot of this ties into what you kind of have in mind, because the reason we talked initially was you were thinking of starting a podcast, and I think that's fascinating as well, because you have a lot of ideas that you want to put forward. But tell me a little bit about, or did you want to talk a little bit about why you want to get into that? Because I don't want anybody stealing your ideas, because I think you're kind of navigating into a foray that I don't feel has really been covered in a sense. So
Yeah. I actually have a lot of ideas and a lot of themes, and I can't say it would be just one thing. I think it would just be, like I always said this even about teaching. I'm like, I love teaching, but I wish I could teach what I want to teach.
right,
Not what I'm told on this document that I have to teach. So it's like, what do I want to talk about? Well, like I want to share some of my experiences, some of my like learning, some of my growth. I've read a lot of books in the last, I don't know, couple years, and just some things that just really stood out and changed my life. Like I would love to just sit down and talk about that. And I would love for some of it to even be with some friends or even some people that have like influenced me or that I just think are really cool. Just talking about parenting and, just education, growing, learning, lots of different ideas that I just would love to just play around with.
because I think that was something you were looking at. Kind of what you had mentioned to me was sort of an online, and I think there would be an educational aspect, but educational for like from an actual teacher's perspective, and you were even talking about videos, which is way out of my realm, but hopefully you can kind of line some stuff up, because I'm really interested to see how this all pans out.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't have like a concrete like plan. I think I just am like throwing it out in the universe, and I'm gonna see what comes back. But yeah, videos would be something that I've also thought about, because I'm a visual auditory learner.
Right.
That's how I learn best. Like if I can see it and I can hear it, then it sticks a lot better.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm here, I guess, with you to learn even just like the audio part of it, or like give me a start. I want a starting space, I guess.
Yeah, my format's very simple, so there's not a lot I can do in the production wise and everything like that. But I will say this: the challenge is to actually, I guess just set the template up And even if you're not 100% sure that that's the way to go, I think it's best to just jump on in and get it going. And sometimes it kind of evolves on its own into its own niche and everything. Like there's nothing set in stone when you delve into this kind of thing. That's the beauty about the podcast and with the way the internet's set up is you can go in any direction you want. You can take all your ideas and sort of somehow along the way get both of them in. So I think just don't wait too long to dive into it. And the other hardest thing is to come up with a podcast name that's, going to stand out from the rest, but still kind of have a bit of an idea of what the general agenda is. So,
right. I've read that too. It's like, really think about your name.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
And then before you decide on it, Google it and see if there's not, because that's the one thing I probably had about a dozen different names for this podcast. And then, the play on the old Monty Python thing, now for something completely interesting. When I Googled that, there was nothing out there. So it was like,
yes,
there it is. And
yeah.
it kind of captures the essence of it. So
yeah, it's clever.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see what you come up with on yours. And
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be supporting that and a fan of that too as
Thank
well.
you.
So yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm going to kind of lead into the final question here I have. So you've listened to a couple of these, so I'm assuming,
yeah.
Okay, so you know this one's coming.
Yeah.
All right, here as someone completely interesting, if you were to name someone for this podcast, I'm not saying they have to come on, but just someone you think deserves to have their story heard, who would that be?
I have a couple actually.
Perfect.
So one is David Michaud.
Okay.
He is like he was my teacher and
Right.
he was my coworker. And it's funny, I subbed his child today, so it's just come full circle. I think he's a really interesting, and he's the connection for the reason why I'm here, I guess. It's him and I sat down and visited, and then he's like, my friend does a podcast. You should talk to him. And I'm like, okay. Do you think he'd talk to me? So so David Michaud is one.
Okay.
Another one is my mom.
Okay.
My mom is a nurse. She's been nursing like her whole career. And we could never go anywhere in town as kids without her stopping and talking to somebody.
Right.
She was one of those people. You'd be like, Mom, can we go? And she had somebody in the grocery, anywhere in town.
Yeah.
Like somebody knew her. So she's met like a ton of people in her lifetime.
I would like to talk to her because I have a lot of interesting questions for the healthcare profession as someone who's been around for a while.
Yeah.
And I think the healthcare has gone through some changes that I'd be interested to hear her opinion of how it is.
Yeah, and she's worked in a few different domains. She did most of it in home care, but yeah.
And someone who's lasted, I'm assuming she's been there for a few years.
Oh, over 30 years.
Yeah, so that would definitely have seen a lot of changes. So
for sure,
I'd hope that if you want to maybe just tear up a little bit and. And as for our friend Dave, and when he said I have a friend who's thinking about doing a podcast, and do you mind if I give her your number to ask questions? I said, I have one condition. You have to come on the podcast. But he's already said, well, I'm not that interesting, which is what everybody says until they start talking. And
it's funny. Yeah. He said that one. I'm like, yes, you are. I'm like, you have the best stories.
He actually has some really good stories. Some he might not be able to say. Yeah. Like, that's how well I know Dave. So like I said, we'll keep it PG, but I'm glad you mentioned him. And again, I'm glad that you reached out to talk to me about this, because when I started poking around and asking, well, why would you want the podcast? And the answers were pretty interesting. And then I love talking to people who've had careers in the I guess the public sector, like teachers and healthcare professionals, because we're bound by these weird regulations and rules by people that I'm referring to politicians that don't necessarily understand what the challenges are. So it's interesting to hear from the front line, so to speak.
Yeah, so it would be nice to pull the people who make all the rules into classrooms. And just be like, just come to the classroom for a day. Come to this grade 1 classroom and see what it's like.
This is, truly understand it.
Yes, exactly.
So once again, thank you so much. My guest is Danica St Arnault, and I hope I pronounced it the correct way. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please give us a like and subscribe through your favorite podcast provider. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram. Just search Poulin Radio. Once again, someone completely interesting, my guest, Danica St Arnault.
Thanks for having me.